The focus is on a major claim coming out of ongoing war in Middle East. Israel says it has eliminated Iran's security chief Ali Larijani in an overnight strike. This marks one of the most high-profile assassinations in this conflict, coming after the killing of Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. This is not just another strike. This is a direct hit on the core of Iran's leadership structure. Larijani was not just a senior official, he was Iran's top security strategist, a former parliament speaker, a key nuclear negotiator, and the man coordinating Iran's response after killing of its supreme leader. In fact, after Khamenei's death, Larijani had effectively emerged as one of the most powerful decision makers in Iran's wartime leadership. And the targeting is not limited to one individual. The Israeli military has also confirmed killing of Gholam Reza Soleimani, the commander of Iran's Basij militia, which is a key force used by the regime to suppress internal dissent. So the big question is, does eliminating Larijani or other leaders cripple Iran, or does the system still hold? Because here's the reality. Iran's power structure is not just built around one man. Over the years, Iran has developed a decentralized command system where military units, missile forces, proxy groups can operate independently of central leadership. And that is exactly why, despite multiple top-level assassinations, Iran continued to fire missiles, deploy drones, and target US and Israeli interests across the region. In other words, leaders are being eliminated, but the war machine is still running. In fact, these strikes may be raising the stakes even further and higher, fueling retaliation, deepening resolve, and expanding the conflict across West Asia. A looming energy crisis linked to disruption in Strait of Hormuz is now threatening India's pharmaceutical sector as well, with fuel shortage forcing production cuts and raising fears of shortages in essential medicines like paracetamol and antibiotics in the coming weeks. So while Israel and the United States may be achieving tactical victories by targeting top figures, the larger strategic picture remains uncertain, because Iran's system is designed to absorb shocks, replace leaders, and continue the fight. And that brings us to the big question. Is this the beginning of Iran's collapse, or the proof that its system is far more resilient than expected?
A message to the President of the United States. The outcome of war cannot be determined by tweets. The result of a war is determined in the field, the very place where you and your forces do not dare to approach, and you can only talk about it in your tweets. It's better to name this war as epic fear instead of epic fury.
All right, joining me on the show is Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, former Indian diplomat. He's also served in Iran. Major General S.B. Asthana, defense and strategic expert, also will be joining very, very shortly. Is Eli Pepras, Director International Relations, Israel Defense and Security Forum. Thank you very much, all of you, for taking time out. Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, I want to come to you first. The elimination of top Iranian leaders, including Khamenei and now Larijani. Is this a signal that Iran's wartime machinery and its structure has adapted on ground? Despite senior leadership, it still continues to fire away?
Well, first of all, let me say that according to the reports I've seen, while Israel has said that it has eliminated Ali Larijani, as also Gholam Reza, I think he was the Basij chief. There has not been any confirmation from the Iranians in this regard. So I'm still waiting to hear from the Iranians what they have to say. But nonetheless, Israel has been targeting the top level leadership of Iran. And of course, on the very first day, when it started the strikes, it had eliminated the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, and also several of the top clergy and the military leaders. They were all having a meeting. Now, Israel will continue to target. And casualties in Iran are certainly going to keep mounting, including important people who get killed. Now, where is the war going from there? Firstly, I think that there are some scenarios that are likely. The most likely scenario is that the present situation continues. That is heavy bombing by America and Israel, and Iranian retaliatory strikes wherever possible against the American bases, against Israel, and also at the countries where American bases are situated. They are not just collateral targets, but they are getting hit because they accommodate the American bases. This is the most likely scenario. But then there are certain other scenarios which are being thought of. Firstly, boots on the ground, because America may like to complete its task. But this scenario is not that likely because the terrain of Iran is such that American ground troops will find it very difficult, and the Iranians are very well entrenched. And the third scenario is that America may say that well, we have achieved our target, as they did in June last year. After a 12-day war, they said we've achieved our targets and they ended the war. But in that case, America's prestige will come down a lot, and Israel will feel totally, left alone. That is also a scenario which I don't think will happen. So, in all likelihood, the present situation with the war going on will continue. The Russia-Ukraine war has gone on for about 4 years. The Israel-Hamas conflict has gone on for about 2.5 years, although there is a sort of a ceasefire, but the war is not ended. So if the Iran-Israel-US war goes on for a long period, I'm afraid that it will have huge consequences for the world, including for India, because we have about
Absolutely.
10 million
I'll come to that. I'll absolutely, Ambassador,
right.
I want to talk about the impact on India, but let me also quickly get in Major General S.B. Asthana. Major General, there is no confirmation from Iranian side whether Larijani is dead or alive, although Israel has said very categorically that we have strategically successfully carried out those strikes and we have killed Larijani. There's no confirmation coming from Iran. Perhaps they're waiting and perhaps he's not dead. So given the fact that there have been high-profile assassinations in the past 24 hours alone, how significant is this hit after Khamenei's death?
As far as these assassinations are concerned, let me tell you in uncertain terms that as Iran war machinery is going to continue, they have prepared very hard since last June, and their preparations are cater for the assassinations of their leaders. And they know the capabilities of Israel. They also know the capabilities of America. And as far as the combat assets are concerned, as far as the air superiority is concerned, in both cases, the standoff strikes and damaging strikes are possible and will continue.
Okay.
As far as the claims are concerned, see, present day war, it is information war and psychological war and war of narrative combined with the conventional war. Now, this is the scenario in which we are living in and in which the war is happening. But normally, I would like to believe that whenever Israel has claimed a high-profile kill, normally the Iranians have taken some time to accept it, but it has come out to be true. So I have a tendency to believe that in all probabilities it would be true, and the video which is being shown of Larijani still alive, it could also be a AI generated video, but we will have to wait and see, as Ambassador mentioned, without jumping to the conclusion. But notwithstanding that, now let me just highlight as to what is the likely scenario. Let me see when, as far as the Iranians are concerned, they are pushed to wall. They have only two aims. One is regime survival, and two is impose heavy cost on America in terms of military, politics, diplomacy, and everything, and drive a wedge between all the allies and America, whether it is regional allies or other allies. And I think in that context, I think Iran is appearing to be successful because America is losing support. President Trump's call for other navies to get into Hormuz, I think, has not found any kind of takers. And apparently, the whole world is convinced that this was an unwanted war, which President Trump started. And it is unlikely to see the aims of America being fulfilled. Now, let me, as some of the scenarios which the ambassador mentioned, let me just take it a little forward. If America, even if America says that, okay, I have achieved all my targets and I hereby withdraw and I have won, he claims victory and goes back. No, that may not happen this time, because the moment he does that, After that, again, there will be a small drone strike. And Iranians will not give him an opportunity to claim victory outright, unlike previous times.
And so, on a follow-up quick question on that, General Asthana, if America were to claim that they've achieved victory, what would that victory look like? Because from the very beginning, there's been a shift in goalpost as to why this war began in the first place. It began for the possibility of Iran acquiring nuclear weapon. Then the conversation was around missiles. Then it further went on to eliminating, Iranian top leadership, the Islamic regime. The Islamic regime is now gone. We don't know if Iran can anymore build a nuclear weapon. So it's a victory in a way.
No, I have a slightly different take for the simple reason, because if you look at the aim of USA to start with, it was regime change. That has not happened. That was the political aim. The strategic aim was to finish off their nuclear arsenal, missile capabilities, combat navy and combat power. To a great extent, the degradation of that has taken place, certainly. Right. As far as other issues are concerned, that to reduce their capability to support proxies, that may also have reduced, but not certainly completely. So the main focus of regime change has not happened. And also the allied aims were that Iran was trading in dollars as far as the oil energy is concerned. That was something which they wanted to perhaps gain control of and put a puppet regime there. That is totally out of the window. It's not happening. Secondly, when he revisited his aims to say that Iran must unconditionally surrender. If Taliban did not surrender in 20 years, he can forget about it, that Iran is going to surrender by any stretch of imagination, because Iran is a much tougher opponent and much tougher terrain, as was mentioned. So that is not happening. And therefore, the victory, even if President Trump claims, can convince only President Trump and nobody else.
Absolutely.
The whole world is facing the economic pressure, including Americans. So I don't think even a claim of victory is going to convince anybody else except President Trump and his staff in White House. Other than that, I don't think anybody will be convinced.
100%, because on the day itself, from Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, when Ayatollah Khamenei died, that should have done the job. But clearly there's a successor. There'll be more successors going forward. So regime change is not feasible. It's not possible as far as Iran is concerned. And all these while, 17 days since the war began, Iran has demonstrated resilience, its capability to carry out a warfare, a decentralized mosaic defense system where no matter who dies, if one commander dies, somebody else takes over. So that war is likely to continue and Iran is not likely to give up. In which case, what is a possible diplomatic off-ramp in your assessment, in your understanding?
Well, India for one has been calling for dialogue and diplomacy. But somehow the parties to the conflict are not at all inclined to talk. The United States has said there is no question of any offer of peace right now. And Iran has also said that it is not interested in any talks. Now, let me clarify that I myself have said that while these two scenarios are being mentioned by academics, particularly in the US, firstly, boots on the ground, secondly, American declaration of war and withdrawal from it. The fact is that these are not likely. I myself very clearly said that. And I said, in all likelihood, the scenario that will happen is the war will continue as it is doing. That is, US and Israeli strikes and Israeli counter-strikes. But as you pointed out, Iran has a very, very well-organized system of, the mantle of responsibility falling on well-defined shoulders in case the leader or the head of an outfit is assassinated. It's called the mosaic system in Iran. And in fact, there is a lot of decentralization. And there is every possibility that in case somebody is targeted and he dies, the mantle of leadership immediately passes on to somebody else and the battle goes on. So just by the assassination of any particular person, to expect that the battle is going to end or the Iranians will weaken, that's not going to happen. The Iranians will fight as they are doing now regardless of who gets targeted.
And Iranians, from the day one, General Asthana, are of the view that they have to ensure that the cost of escalation goes up. So tiring out the US, tiring out their, their military structure, but more importantly, ensuring that they dry up US's coffers, and which is exactly what's happening. With each passing day, billions of dollars are being spent, General Asthana, on funding this war. So one of the ways in which we also see this ending, perhaps, is when there's enough and more pressure built on Donald Trump internally.
Certainly. The Iranians' strategy is that as of now, they will continue with conventional war so long they have the kind of arsenal and ammunition what they have. Subsequently, when it is going to go down, because obviously they don't have unlimited resources. So when it goes down, in all probabilities, they will shift over to the guerrilla warfare as well as to the sporadic attacks, which we call as hazardous attack, or trying to say it's something like they will fire some drones in either American bases or in financial establishments or their diplomacies or their embassies and things like that. And thereafter, America will be forced to respond. And then they have to respond costly. So they will not let them relax. That is the kind of warfare which Taliban was doing for almost 20 years. That is the warfare which Vietnamese did for very long time, and Iranians are also quite capable of doing exactly the same. And they have a advantage in a manner that Americans have put fair amount of resources all around them, whether in terms of bases or in terms of their banks or in terms of their investments and things like that. So they have enough targets around, and with that they can play the game of harassing fire every time, even when their ammunition is down and even when their strength is little down. So like that, I think it's going to be I must also talk about this boots on ground. You see, when Iraq happened and then Afghanistan happened, they had made their Americans, firstly their allies were with them. This is not the case this time. Secondly, they had made a logistic preparation of ground logistic support and logistic chain almost 6 months in advance. In case of Iraq, this chain was made and these logistic bases were made in Saudi Arabia. In case of Afghanistan, they were made through Pakistan via Karachi. Americans have done no preparation this time, and therefore they do not have the capability of boots on ground as far as their forces are concerned. All that they can do is they can muster up some troops and maybe land up some people in Kharg. That's the only capability they have as far as boots on ground are concerned. So that option is practically not viable, because it will take at least a couple of months for them to muster that strength and logistic support to put boots on ground.
All right.
Also, let me tell you, unlike our soldiers, American soldiers' logistic requirement is hell of a lot, at least 8 to 10 times. So therefore, their logistic support required is far too much, and they fire far too much. Their rate of fire is far too heavy, and therefore that much of ammunition replenishment is required. So it's not all that easy for them.
Absolutely. And in absence of boots on ground, historically, it would be impossible, for US and Israeli forces to really capture Iran at all, or to initiate a regime change, in which case, moving on to the impact on India. Ambassador Dayal, there's a substantial impact on India by the way of LPG crisis that India has been seeing for the past 1 week now. Although India has been able to strategically mitigate by ensuring that its vessels pass through Strait of Hormuz, and Iran has been considerate to allow Indian flagged vessels to pass through Strait of Hormuz, we're looking at other secondary shortages as well. As of this morning, we are also learning of where there could be shortage by the way of methane and commercial LPG impacting other industries, including pharmaceutical industries. Where does this leave India?
The longer that this war continues, the greater will be the impact on India. And if the war is not showing signs of ending, then it's a matter of great concern for us, because as you said, apart from LPG, there are a whole range of products which are going to be impacted. I have read reports that pharmaceuticals and plastic goods, packaging material, a lot of stuff is going to be impacted. So I think we should prepare for every sort of contingency. Of course, another major impact is going to be on our diaspora. We have about 10 million Indians living in the war-affected area. And they would stand to lose jobs, they would lose their security, and that will affect also, for instance, remittances coming to India, which will have an impact on our balance of payments. So there is an entire chain of events which could be set in motion by the continuation of this conflict. And I think India is going to be a country which is going to be very, very adversely impacted because, firstly, we have such a large diaspora, and secondly, we have a heavy reliance on the Gulf area for our energy imports because they mostly come through the Strait of Hormuz, which is a war-affected zone.
Absolutely. And, General Asthana, so far people who've been sitting on the fence and those who've been criticizing India's foreign policy, from foreign policy point of view, India has maintained a strategic distance from getting in this war, from being a participant, from either, condoling the death of Ayatollah Khamenei because that happened 5 days too late, or from supporting US or Israel outright. And that in a way has paid off. So all those naysayers, critics who've been watching India's diplomacy unfold, a diplomacy of non-cooperation, something that India's proudly, stand that India's proudly taken for many, many years now since Cold War, I think that's also paying off.
Certainly, I think this diplomacy of India of maintaining strategic autonomy, maintaining multilateral engagement, and not siding with anybody or any party of the war, I think that is paying. More than that, what I must also tell you, that in the long-term perspective, if you want Viksit Bharat 2047, you have to channelize all your resources to your own development, and you cannot flitter resources into various campaigns. China did exactly the same. From 1980 onwards, China had a strategy called as calculative strategy. That means postponed all disputes and concentrate, build your strength, hide your intention, and don't get involved in any campaign or any dispute. That is what they followed, and that paid them well. Today, they have become a very strong challenger to United States. So, like that, if we want to become Viksit Bharat 2047, we cannot afford to get involved in longer wars. That was one of the reasons, strategically speaking, very aptly done. And we, I think, demonstrated to the entire world as to how you can have a good exit strategy in Op Sindoor. So we went there, we did our job, and then thereafter, we had our exit strategy, and we also knew what is the end state we are looking at. So, like that, I think we will have to follow this policy. This policy stands vindicated, and the whole world is now looking at it because the moment those two tankers passed through Hormuz, I think the whole world was praising India in more than one way as to how they have pulled it out from a campaign, the best scenario for their own population.
And I think India has also made it very clear, Ambassador Dayal, that we're not going to give up our oil reserves. It's not a war. Don't get us entangled in a war that we did not start. We have nothing to do. And that's the strategic diplomacy, autonomy that we have maintained during, Ukraine-Russia war as well, not taking a stand, ensuring that India meets the need of its own people first. Ambassador, before I let you go, if the war prolongs, what should India's foreign policy be? What should India's strategy be?
Well, I think India should continue on the same path as it's doing. That is, maintaining a policy of strategic autonomy coupled with multi-alignment. India should not fashion its foreign policy to align with any one particular country or any one particular group. It's a time when we have to make our decisions very carefully, keeping in mind, as you put it, the interests of our people, our national interests. And they certainly align with this policy of strategic autonomy because getting into a conflict or even getting closer to any one side would be perilous for our national.
Absolutely. Ambassador Prabhu General Asthana, thank you very much, gentlemen, for taking time out, for joining us on the show. It's the day 17th and over of the war in Middle East, and the ripple effects are being felt here in India as well. But moving on, Israel's war with Iran has entered a far more dangerous phase today in what is being seen as one of the most high-profile strikes yet. Israel has claimed to have completely eliminated two key leaderships, including Ali Larijani, who was a key figure in Iran's strategic and security architecture, just weeks after a reported targeting of Ali Khamenei. The back-to-back hits raise a critical question. Is Israel attempting a full-scale decapitation of Iran's leadership, or are these tactical strikes aimed at disrupting command and control in the middle of an active conflict? What's equally significant is Iran's response. Despite these targeted killings, Tehran has not shown signs of collapse. Instead, it has escalated, launching missile and drone strikes across the Gulf, signaling that its decentralized military doctrine remains intact. The so-called mosaic defense strategy appears to be absorbing these shocks, even as the risk of a wider regional war across West Asia grows by the day. And the ripple effects are, as I mentioned earlier, already being felt globally. With tensions threatening the Strait of Hormuz, energy markets on edge, countries like India are watching closely, balancing strategic ties, energy security, and economic fallout.